Please welcome on stage here or on virtual platform here, as I would say it now, His Grace Yogesvara Prabhu. All over to you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, follow-up for that bombastic introduction. My first suggestion is that Bhakti Marg Swami find a way to bottle you. And if we can sell you around the world as an energy drink, I think we can probably fund all of the temples in ISKCON very easily. So we're lucky to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And welcome everyone. I'm quite honored to be the person to lead off this exploration of a hero journey. It's a subject that I've taught at Hofstra University. And for this, by way of a brief introduction, since I don't know everybody here, I was 19 years old when I moved into the London Temple in 1969. I'm 71 now. I'm a grandfather. But during the 13 years that I lived in temples, I was privileged to serve in a variety of capacities. And my greatest good fortune was to get to travel with Srila Prabhupada. So I'm going to share my screen here now and give you a chance to put a few visuals together that'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about as I tell you about all this. Years later, after I came back to America, I was teaching at Hofstra University, and that's where I began noticing that there were certain parallels between the teachings of Krishna Consciousness and the monomyth, or the hero journey. So I want to give you a little bit of background on that as a way of getting our retreat started here this year. The way we'll work this is I'll talk it up for a little bit, and then I hope we'll be able to open this up to some questions and answers at the end. In the field of mythology, there's this idea called the monomyth, or the one great myth, also called the hero journey. The concept was introduced by the late mythologist Joseph Campbell in his 1949 book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Campbell traveled the world and discovered a basic narrative pattern in the great myths and legends of history, and also in the lives of famous personalities. So the first here's an illustration of what the monomyth can look like in a simple form. Campbell acknowledged, by the way, that the structure that you're seeing here is not a rigid template. You know, it has variations from culture to culture, but it can be generally outlined in the form that you're seeing here. Or this is a little bit more detailed way of getting a sense of the monomyth. But there's no denying that there are certain similarities in the great stories of history that describe how men and women arrive at breakthroughs in their life. It can get very complex, as you're seeing here, but it can be broken down to some rather simple basic stages. So let me walk you through those. The monomyth, or the hero journey, begins when a person leaves the ordinary, everyday world. We can call it the matrix, we can call it the Maya world, we can call it conditioned life. It's the world that we live in every day without really having to think much about it. And then at some point in our common everyday life, something, either voluntarily or forced by circumstances, we're pushed out of our comfort zone and we embark on what Campbell called the role of trials. Now, this may be something that happens when there's a mentor or a guru who's describing for you something that you realize, gee whiz, my life is incomplete. I have not yet really reached the fullness of my life. I need to do something about that. Now, not everyone agrees to accept this call to adventure. Some people don't think they're ready for it and they pull back, and that's fine. There's no judgment here. But those people who are able to cross that road, that call to adventure, embark on what Campbell calls the road of trials. Now, somehow the road of trials, these trials, by the way, seem to come in groups of three. For some reason, life's challenges come in threes. Not quite sure why. Think, for example, of Hanuman leaping over the Indian Ocean to get to Lanka And 3 times he had to reach a point of confrontation with a challenge. It's like that. They seem to come in threes for some reason. This road of trials brings us to a point that Campbell called the threshold. If you're able to embrace these challenges and reach a certain midway point in this road of adventure and trials, you confront what Campbell called the threshold. The threshold is an embarking into an unknown world. You're leaving behind now the known world, and you're entering into a world that you are not familiar with. You don't know what it's going to bring. You don't know what it's going to do to you. It could be something as simple as a new job, or going off to college, or getting married, becoming a parent, moving into an ashram. There are all kinds of thresholds that we might cross in this journey to fulfillment, or what Campbell calls the monomythic journey. Once you cross this threshold, things aren't over. The challenges aren't. They only just get begun now. You face what Campbell calls the point of no return. This is an ordeal, somewhat like Jonah in the belly of the whale in the Bible, where there's no turning back now. Here you change who you have been, or you die. It's a baptism. It's a baptism by fire. It's confronting the dragon. In myths and legends, there are many metaphors to embody this idea of reaching a point where you cannot turn back. My son is a pilot. There's a place called the point of no return. I think he's on the program with us. He can correct me if I've got this wrong. When you've exhausted your fuel and you can no longer turn back, that point of no return is somewhat metaphorically like Campbell's belly of the whale. The ordeal at this point poses crises, obstacles that stand in the way of making further progress down that hero journey road. Those who can overcome this, if you can overcome this moment of absolute critical change that Campbell again calls the belly of the whale, then it's possible to achieve the victory of the boon. Now, what is the boon? Again, that's specific to each person, to each individual. But it's the thing that opens the door to a fulfilled life. In myths, it can be the hidden treasure. It can be the Holy Grail. It can be a princess who needs to be saved from the castle where she's been kidnapped. The Sita being freed from Ravana's island kingdom. It can be the gold, the pot of gold that's being guarded in a cave by a fierce dragon. There are all kinds of boons that one can achieve at this point. Now, if you've achieved that boon, if you've embraced the light, it can be the light of knowledge is also a boon. At this point, the hero has an option of returning home and bringing that boon into society or not. And this return to the ordinary world is another turning point. What do I mean by that? Well, not everyone, for example, is cut out to be a world preacher, right? You may achieve the knowledge that you were looking for. I finally found Krishna Consciousness. I finally found the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And you decide that for yourself, you're not going to become a guru. You're not going to become a world preacher. That what you want to do is take this knowledge and nurture it within yourself. That's perfectly acceptable as well. But those who do choose to bring that boon back into society have the opportunity of sharing that light, sharing that knowledge with the rest of the world. Now, if you've seen any of these movies, you are familiar with the monomyth template. Hollywood loves the monomyth, absolutely loves the Hollywood. There was a Disney screenwriter named Christopher Vogler, who back in the mid-'80s wrote a book called The Writer's Journey. Same idea, taking Campbell's monomyth model and applying it to screenwriting. So we see the pattern repeated across time, across cultures, across religions, across social strata. If you study the life of Lord Jesus, not to compare the life of Jesus Christ with Hollywood films, but the story of Jesus, conforms quite well to the monomyth model, as does the life of Buddha, the Prophet Muhammad, blessed be he. Well, they all went through a kind of monomythic journey to bring the light of knowledge into the world. Here you see other examples of the monomyth at work in literature and epic tales. It's there in The Lord of the Rings. It's there in Jason's search for the Golden Fleece. It's there in the great epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's there in the trials of Odysseus seeking to get home after the Trojan Wars. It's there in the story of Moby Dick and the quest for the great white whale, in the rise of Joan of Arc from obscure peasant girl to the heroine of medieval France, who becomes a military leader and seeks France's victory in a long-running war with England. In the novel Jane Eyre, author Charlotte Bronte brings readers into the emotions and experiences of the title character, including her growth into adulthood and the gradual unfolding of Jane's moral and spiritual sensibility. This is also a kind of monomythic journey. It is certainly there in the freedom marches and the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. For what is the monomyth if not the following of a dream? So I decided, what about our stories? What about the Vedic tales? So I went back into the Bhagavatam and elsewhere. This template, this model fits absolutely perfectly in our favorite stories. It's there in the lives of Prahlad. It's there in the story of Dhruva Maharaj. It's certainly there in the story of Narada Muni, Jad Bharat, and clearly there in the lives of the Pandavas. And this monomyth is dramatically evident in what is arguably the single most pervasive story to come out of India, namely Star Wars. Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute. I didn't mean Star Wars. I meant the Ramayana. Oh, that's interesting. Why am I getting these two stories confused? Well, the answer is quite simple. They are identical. Let me show you what I mean. In both stories, there is a dark lord who wants to take over the universe. In both stories, there is a beautiful princess whom the dark lord kidnaps, and the dark lord holds the princess captive until finally a young hero sets out to find the princess and rescue her. There is a wise teacher in both Ramayana and Star Wars who instructs the prince how to use mystic weaponry that will help him to rescue the princess. There is in both a monkey-like creature who helps the prince rescue the princess. There is also a feisty older buddy type brother's character who helps the prince to rescue the princess. The hero wages a great battle against the Dark Lord and his forces of evil, and there are these giant things that the hero has to fight. Strange, isn't it, the parallels between these two? And they win the battle. The hero wins the battle with the help of an army of monkey and bear-like creatures. So you have to ask yourself, how is it that these stories are so amazingly closely aligned? Then, of course, at the end of the story, the princess and the prince are brought together for this return to the capital and a great coronation ceremony. The answer to why these two stories seem so identical is that George Lucas, the creator of the Star Wars franchise, invited mythologist Joseph Campbell to live with him at Lucas Ranch during the writing of the Star Wars scripts. And here is Campbell describing for George Lucas the monomyth and the elements of the Ramayana. Lucas admitted later on that he was greatly influenced by what he called Eastern myths while writing the scripts for Star Wars, which could very well be analyzed as a screen adaptation of the Ramayana. And so for us here, becoming devotees, which is the greatest of all monomythic journeys, the call to adventure, the road of trials, the ordeal, we've all known these stages in our Krishna conscious careers. And the hero journey within Krishna consciousness reminds us of something that Joseph Campbell was very fond of saying, namely, we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. Let me give you a little bit of an example, if I may, from the life of our beloved founder, Acharya. Srila Prabhupada, as a young man, had not intended to become a world preacher. He didn't start out that way. And he also had to take a kind of hero journey to reach the fulfillment of his mission in this world. It was in the early 1900s that he came to the West, and we can go into the entire story there, but I want to just bring this quickly back to something that's very personal, as a way of showing you how within our own lives, there is a similar kind of template that we can trace. We can trace our own hero journey through our lifetime to becoming devotees in Krishna consciousness. What you see here is a picture of me and my mom when I was a boy. And the background here is that I used to have repeating dreams of flying off of a building. But I would end up falling off the building and flying instead of flying off the building. And I wondered over the course of my earlier life, why this constant repeating nightmare, really? And in my case, I was the only child of divorced parents. So there was no dad at home protecting my mother. And so I felt that I had to take care of her myself. So from that background, I might have grown up with certain feelings of inadequacy or incapable of living up to what was expected, what I expected of myself. Or in the extreme, we might consider ourselves to be pretenders. This kind of applying of the hero's journey became quite clear to me as I went, after I came out of temple life after 13 years. I was seeing a therapist because, after all, what do you do after 13 years in Krishna temples? You find a good therapist. What was I thinking? And Martha Friedman, who passed away some years ago, by the way, you see the corner of the book there. I had a cat who used to love eating books. That's why, anyway. So this was an unexpected explanation of why we get in the way of the things that we want. Martha was the therapist I was seeing for some time, and she wrote this book, Overcoming the Fear of Success. Now, when people look at the title of this book, they do a double take. You say to yourself, well, nobody in their right mind is afraid of success. What we're afraid of is failure. No. Let me give you an example from the book. One of Martha's well-known patients was a very famous, very successful songwriter. Martha invited this man to address her students at Columbia University. She taught psychotherapy in Columbia. And this guy did a bit of a change up. As soon as he got in front of her class, he said to them, don't listen to what Martha tells you. It's a lot of hooey. There's no such thing as fear of success. I love my success. My worst song won an Oscar, and I just love being a success. There's no such thing as fear of success. So one of the students, a very intelligent young woman, raised her hand and said, did you always want to be a songwriter? To which he replied, well, no. When I was a young man, I wanted to just be a professional piano player. So this student asked him, well, you're a big success now. You can do whatever you want. Have you ever thought about going back and becoming a professional piano player? And he said, well, I tried it a few times, but whenever I did, I ended up burning my fingers. Really. So here's what came out in the discussion. When this fellow was a young man, he came from a very poor family. His mother and father depended on him just for putting food on the table. And there was simply more money to be earned writing songs than becoming a professional piano player. So now this is a splendid example of self-sabotage, what Martha calls the fear of success. If he was going to become successful playing piano, it would mean denying his parents the support that they needed from him by him becoming a professional songwriter. So what we learn both from the hero journey and from good informed therapy is that this kind of self-sabotaging behavior, it's something that comes from childhood. It's something that resides in the unconscious. We're not always even aware of why we behave the way we do, why we do things that get in the way of our progress in Krishna consciousness. I mean, this is there in Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna asks Krishna, was it fifth chapter? I don't remember which chapter. He says, why is it that we act in a way that's against our own best interests? Even if we know better, we find that we can't stop ourselves from behaving in a way that we know is wrong, but we still do it. So this particular line of questioning is right there in the Bhagavad Gita. So in Krishna consciousness, we believe, for example, that anyone can become self-realized by chanting. Just chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Well, why doesn't that happen? I think we tend to ignore the very thing that chanting is meant to bring us, which is namely a reason for confronting our fears, confronting the things that stand in the way of our making further progress in our lives, whether that be with family, with career, with our Krishna consciousness. There's this message that seems to come out from society. It's a double message, go for it, but don't expect to get it. Let me give you a couple of other examples from Martha's book. Take a perfectly healthy child who seems unable to read, just can't learn to read, right? So we'll call her Patricia. So little Patricia's parents are fighting all the time, and she feels that her security is threatened. So her teacher calls the parents and says, your daughter's having trouble reading. Why? Because if the parents get a call like that and they find that their daughter is in some kind of distress, they stop fighting and they give her their attention. They focus their attention on their underachieving daughter. So the not reading is the excuse for stopping her parents from fighting. And as long as she has this problem, since she can't read, she feels that her parents won't split up and she'll be left abandoned. So some children will do that. They'll fail at school in order to keep their family together. I'll give you another example. Let's say as adults, you have a certain kind of behavior pattern and you're wondering where it comes from. Well, let's say that you grew up with a father who didn't know how to encourage you because let's say he had very low self-esteem. Well, you get a prize in school, you do well in school, or you win in gym, some athletic competition. But the response you get when you bring this achievement home to your father is indifference, silence, no recognition of it. Well, what do you do in a situation like that to get the attention that you so yearn for? If winning isn't getting you that attention, what do? You lose. If the only way you could get attention growing up was to be passive or to fail at something, well, perhaps today as an adult, you might fail and let other people take advantage of you even because you think it's the only way that you'll be accepted. It's the only way that you're going to get the attention that you so crave. Let's look at one more example. There's a fear of entering into a relationship. Well, why is that? Why do we fear relationship? Well, we think we have this attitude about ourselves. Once somebody gets to know me, they'll see how flawed I am and they're not going to want to be with me. They're going to want to leave anyway. So why get involved in a relationship to start? Or if something good happens to me, I know something is going to come along to spoil it. So why set myself up for that kind of heartbreak and disappointment, right? Or no one knows that, no one I know has a healthy relationship. Certainly I don't deserve one either. Right? So we give ourselves all kinds of reasons for setting the odds up against us. There was one case that Martha talked about of a patient, a young woman who could never finish her coursework. She wanted to go back to college and finish her college degree. And for some reason, she was unable to do so. Well, in her sessions with Martha, what she found out, she remembered that she and her younger sister, that she was the preferred of the two daughters. His sister never did as well as she did in school. And the parents, bless their hearts, in front of their daughters would say things like, well, at least one of our kids turned out okay. So this woman could never finish her degree because she saw her success as coming at the price of her younger sister's failure and unhappiness. How could I do this to my own sister? At my own work with Holocaust survivors, I've known several who, as prisoners in concentration camps, well, before I get to that, children of alcoholics, for example, say to themselves, if I'd been a better child, maybe my parents wouldn't be drinking so much. It's my fault. I'm the bad person here. I'm not worthy of any success. Their shortcomings, their difficulties in life are my fault. Going back to some of the Holocaust survivors I've worked with, they're so brainwashed inside the concentration camps where they were demeaned, humiliated, dehumanized, made to live the most abominable kind of life, that they were browbeaten into believing what they were being told, namely that they're not really human beings at all. The Nazi propaganda was that Jews in particular, but others as well, were not full-fledged human beings. They were bacteria infecting the social body, and that Aryans, pure blood Germans, had what was called a redemptive anti-Semitic responsibility to rid society of these germs, of these bacteria who are bringing down the rest of society. So if you live with that kind of propaganda long enough, you start to believe it. One Holocaust survivor, I remember, talked about how when she would set the table for Shabbat dinner or for Passover dinner, she would give everyone else at the table a crystal glass, and for herself she put a paper cup, because she never thought that she was worthy of having even a glass on the same level as the other people at the table. If there's anyone here who teaches yoga, I've had yoga teachers come to me and admit to feeling, they say nice things about me in class when I give class, but if they really knew me, they'd know that I'm not advanced at all in yoga. I'm just a pretender. If I'm such a great yoga teacher, then how come I can't hold down a relationship? How come I can't pay my bills? You have to plug in your own story here. I think the ultimate fear of success was one of Martha's clients, the actor Richard Dreyfuss, who was nominated for an Oscar one year. And she asked him, so how do you feel about being nominated for an Academy Award? And Dreyfuss thought for a minute and he said, this one's probably worth at least cancer. What? Meaning, anything good that comes my way, I'm going to have to pay for it. I don't deserve it. So I don't know what the price is going to be for this one, but it's going to be intense. So all of our relationships become qualified by these kinds of, we might call them unconscious restraints. These are the road of trials that Campbell's talking about in the monomyth journey. So in Krishna consciousness, we may not be aware of these things. We may doubt our right to progress spiritually. And that's why I salute Bhakti Marg Swami and the others who have organized this mantra retreat, which is an awfully difficult title to live with. But for having put it together, they deserve credit. It's a chance for all of us here to go deeper inside our own unique hero journey, our Krishna conscious journey, And I'm very pleased that they thought to include me in their opening activities today. So thank you for your attention. If anyone would like to ask a question or perhaps offer a comment, this would be a good opportunity for us to do that. So what do? Do we let people just unmute themselves, or do you want to let people ask questions in the chat box? What would be the Vallabhari Prabhu? What's the right way to go about it?
Yes, Yogesvara Prabhu. So we would allow the participants to ask questions if they want to ask via the chat sessions or if they want to unmute themselves. But before that, I would definitely want to thank you for taking us through this entire hero's journey. It was definitely inspirational. It was an amazing journey. And I was reading the comments already. The participants loved the presentation. And thank you so much. I think everyone in the world would have loved this presentation except one individual, who's George Lucas, the creator of the Star Wars. So I'm sure, because I felt he was one of the most financially successful filmmakers that, he's been nominated so many times for Academy Awards, but actually the true creator is someone else, as you mentioned, and you brought those points. So the presentation was incredible. So thank you so much, Yogesvara Prabhu, for taking us to the entire hero's journey. And I'm sure there are a lot of heroes sitting across the world wanting to ask us questions, and we open the stage for them to ask us questions.
So you want to read them from the chat box, or are we going to have people just unmute themselves?
Yes, so if anybody wants to unmute themselves, I would also request the host out there, the Zoom host out there, to give us the directions, how would they want to do. But I do have a question which is raised by Navkishore Das. As a question which says, it seems that the hero takes shelter of humility to actualize their journey towards an obstacle, whereas the hero who has low self-esteem is unable to face the challenge they are confronted with. Is that accurate?
Would you say that once more, please?
Yeah. It seems that the hero takes shelter of humility to actualize their journey towards an obstacle, whereas the hero who has low self-esteem is unable to face the challenge they are confronted with.
Well, I understand why the impulse would be to draw that kind of a conclusion, that if you have low self-esteem, therefore you're unable to approach the goal that you are striving for in your life. Sometimes it's quite the opposite, though. Here's what I've learned in my own Krishna conscious journey. Very often, spiritual progress comes disguised as material failure. The very thing that you look at through a self-critical lens as a miserable failure or a shortcoming might actually be an asset. There's that wonderful verse where Lord Sri Krishna says, those whom I favor most, I take everything away from them. Srila Prabhupada confronted that. Most of the great acharyas in our lineage have confronted that. So low self-esteem could just be the doorstep into some very, very exciting progress in your spiritual growth. The willingness to admit that you are dealing with low self-esteem, that's the confrontation with the obstacles or the challenges that allows us to make further progress. It's denying that you have that problem that is the defeat on the journey, on the path of the hero journey. It's saying, hey, I'm good. You know, are you really? So a willingness to say, I have this that I'm dealing with. Now the universe can come to your aid. If you don't ask for help, where can help go to? There's no place for help to come to. You have to ask for it. So sometimes it's just the opposite.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question, for the answer, Yogesvara Prabhu. There's also another question that says, does the hero take the journey out of his free will, or is it due to his karma, predestined, including the outcome?
Yeah, no, very often this journey, the hero, and by the way, the hero just doesn't mean you know, the Ulysses and the Odysseus and the Arjunas and the Joan of Arcs of history. Each of us is the hero on a hero journey. So we're talking about ourselves here. State that question again, please. Just repeat it once more.
Yeah, so the hero, do they take the journey out of their own free will, or is it due to their karma, which is predestined, including the outcome?
So very often we'll find ourselves kicking and screaming at the moment of having to confront something, and you won't want to do it. You don't want to do it, but you're being pushed out of your comfort zone. You have to do it. Something's compelling you to do that. If you read other mythologists, like Ursula Le Guin, for example, the author of Wizard of Earthsea, she'll use a metaphor such as embracing the shadow. If you just allow yourself to confront the thing that you most fear, the thing that you're most afraid of in life, very often what you'll find is you didn't have to be so afraid of it. You know, it's like I remember as a young brahmachari, the thought of getting up in the morning and taking a freezing cold shower in the middle of winter terrified me. You know, I just hated it. Actually doing it was kind of invigorating, you know. I wouldn't do it now, I'm 71, but back then, you know, there was something, you know, so it's in the thought in the mind is terrifying of having to do this. When you actually do it, you find that it's not as fearful as you might have imagined. And that's required. We have to come out of our skin. You know, it's like a snake shedding its old skin. Something has to die. The old self has to die in order for the new self to be born. And that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. Krishna consciousness is you shedding your old snake-like skin of the life you've lived, the Maya world, the karma world, the matrix world, and stepping forward into the life that you have the privilege of leading as a devotee. That can be terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And again, I say, not everyone's prepared to do it. I've known many people, we've known many people, Anuttama and I and Bhakti Marg Swami, they were in Krishna consciousness for years. And then you turn around and they're gone. Where did they go? What happened to them? It's because they reached a point on that path when they had to do something that was so fearful that they just said, I can't, I'm not ready for that. And usually at that point, they come up with an excuse. Conspiracy theories, you know, anything and everything just to actually avoid the hard work of becoming Krishna conscious. And that's really mostly what that is. All of these various excuses. It's just a detour, a blindfold, so that you don't have to do the very thing that really will help you, which is to cultivate humility, to acknowledge others, to develop the qualities of a devotee, which I think what happens unconsciously, we think, if I do that, I'm going to lose whatever security I've already worked very hard to create for myself in this life, and I don't want to do that. It can be very scary. You know, it's not an easy thing at all. If I think, you know, Prabhupada said, you know, just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. If we knew what he really had in mind, what Krishna consciousness was really all about, we might have run the other way, because it means confronting the very thing that you never wanted confronted in your entire life. Krishna consciousness will mow you down to your roots if you let it. And then you can grow healthy. Not everyone's ready.
Well, that's absolutely correct there. And before we take more questions, I also need to read out one of these comments out here that says, this is such a cool presentation. Yogi never disappoints. So one of the heroes telling us that the yogi never disappoints, and Prabhuji, maybe that's for you, that thank you so much for this amazing presentation. I think Mangalananda Prabhu here has a question. Yes, Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Yogesvara Prabhu, thank you for the wonderful presentation. So you had one slide there with Srila Prabhupada, but I feel you didn't touch much on how the hero's journey concept applied in Srila Prabhupada's personal example. I was wondering if you could share some light on how this concept, maybe we could find some parallels in Srila Prabhupada's life.
You know, I intentionally didn't do that because I wanted us to have time to discuss, so I abbreviated the presentation. Srila Prabhupada met his spiritual master, was it 1922? And he was, what, 26 years old? And he was terrified by what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said to him. Go abroad, basically leave everything and become a world preacher. And even though Srila Prabhupada's father had, trained him in that way, he said the idea of leaving, how can I leave my family? How can I leave my children? That would, don't think that, following in the footsteps of the Acharya means for us that we leave our family and children behind and we, become, world preachers. That's not what we're meant to do. That was his journey. That's not necessarily our journey. But giving up all sources of income and revenue, living like a pauper in Vrindavan, you want to talk about the belly of the whale. He had nothing. He was begging, what's that Sanskrit word? Not bakshish, there's another word. Whatever you get from someone for food, that's all that you have to eat for the day.
Madhukari, Madhukari. It's called Madhukari.
Madhukari. And then, point of no return, he comes to America, right? If you read the letters books, he was going all the time back to the Scindia steamship line office saying, when's the next boat back? And he couldn't take it. America, my God, what a horrible place. You know what the Sanskrit word is for the West? It's like, Yava land, Mlecha land. Worst, most abominable conditions here. And this was someone who was raised in a very distinguished, very religious, Orthodox Vaishnava family. He had never been exposed to this kind of degradation before. We talk about a belly of the whale. And then he wrote a letter, this one letter, I put it in the biography, Swami in a Strange Land, where he wrote a God brother. He said, I've just changed my mind. He says, I'm going to stick it out here. I'm going to die here. I'll die here before I get on that boat and go back to India. He says, I can't even imagine what that moment was like for him when he just said, okay, Krishna, whatever you want. I have nothing. You brought me to this place where I'm surrounded by the most abominable things. But I'm not going to leave. I'm sticking it out. I'm sticking to this course. That's a hero journey right there. Achieving the boon, my God, spreading Krishna consciousness around the world. What bigger boon is there than that? And then return to the ordinary world. I think that's when he brought Western disciples back to India and showed what could be done. It's a classic template of the monomyth model if you look at Prabhupada's life in that through that lens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have a couple of more questions which are there in the comment section. I can definitely take them, but I need to tell the audience out there that you get more attention if you raise your hand, if you are ready to be on the video, and so that I can see you and you can ask the question. That just gives us the direct, view of you and you asking the questions. And on hearing that, the communication director, he was the first one to raise his hand. I can see Anutama Prabhu, he quickly raised his hand there. I can also see Vrindavan Nath Das Prabhu. But first, I'm going to give the opportunity to Nasim Anand Prabhu there so that he can ask the question because his hand was raised from quite a while now.
Oh, thank you so much. Yogesvara Prabhu, I'm a little perplexed with the hero's journey of Dhruva Maharaj. Maybe you can explain a little more, because after all, he was basically on a journey to aggrandize himself with wealth and power. It was only by the mercy of Vishnu that he, was able to drop all of those things and understand his real purpose in life. So how exactly does that contain the the elements of a hero's journey?
Well, because he was on the wrong path. And the big turnaround for him in his epic narrative curve was realizing that, oh my gosh, I've been looking for a piece of broken glass this whole time. I thought getting a kingdom bigger than my father's was the boon that I wanted in my life. And now I understand that I was mistaken. That's the turnaround for him when he realized I've found a diamond instead of a piece of broken glass. Now I've found a diamond. And ironically, he had to live out that material luxury as it was almost a punishment. The very thing that you think you want turns out to be what you don't want. And the thing that you don't want turns out to be the great blessing of your life. So, Campbell himself acknowledged that not all monomythic journeys exactly fit the template that he described. In fact, Campbell himself fell under quite a bit of scrutiny later in life. He was accused of being anti-Semitic and racist and actually looking down on world cultures. He would only take stories that fit his model, and he wouldn't analyze things completely, showing the other side of it. But still, there's some value in his research and in his work. And so it may not fit exactly the mood that of now I've achieved the boon. It may be now I realize that the thing I thought was my boon is not the boon. And now I can grow. Now I can shed these anchors of what I thought I wanted in life, and I can move forward toward my real treasure, my real joy in life.
Well, I hope, Narasimhan Prabhu, that answered your question. And Vrindavan Prabhu, where are you joining us from?
I'm from in New York City, and it's good to be here.
Oh, wait, thank you. So EST time zone. Yes, go ahead, ask the question, please.
So, Prabhu, I know we connected earlier on this topic, and my wonder along the way in thinking and reviewing the hero's journey model is that given that, like the Lord himself and Lord Ram, you could even say Varaha incarnation of going down and picking the earth back up, kind of track this journey. Was this like, what I'm trying to get at, is this like an eternal, or divine model that then plays out time and time again? Is it part of the Lord's, something connected with the Lord is eternal? So is this also an eternal kind of tracking?
No, time out. No, this is just a convenient metaphor for looking at your life in a different way. There's nothing absolute or transcendental about it at all. In fact, be very careful about models, that promise to simplify your life and spell it all out for you. There's nothing simple like that. Some people I know are studying something called an Enneagram or something. I mean, I suppose there's value in almost anything if you're looking at it through the right kind of a lens. But don't fall into the trap of thinking that there's an easy way out. That, oh, now I get what it's all about here. No, this is just a good, it's a good checkup. It's a good way of stepping back away from your life and reviewing things, and recognizing that, first of all, you're not alone. Everybody goes through similar kinds of challenges, in their own way. It may not be the same road of trials that you're on, but everyone is on some kind of road of trials, things they have to confront. And, the great blessing that we have is one another's company. We have Sangha, we have the mantra retreat as a way of, bringing us all together so that you don't have to go down this path alone. What a blessing that is. If you play your cards right, and if you look for the kind of company of devotees whom you can trust with confidences, then the path can become quite clean and quite bright a lot faster than it might for other people. Prabhupada really did give us some extraordinary tools for making rapid spiritual progress. So take advantage of that. That's a wonderful, much better than any kind of monomythic templates is good sangha. That's the best thing you can do.
Oh, thank you, Prabhuji, for that. We have the question, of course, we want to ask from Anutama Prabhu wants to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you. And Yogesvara, thanks for being with us tonight. This is a really great way to kick off our retreat. I didn't know much about the hero's journey until we started talking about it as maybe a template for the retreat this year. We're going to be looking at different kind of phases that you've highlighted in some of the panels and further discussions about, like tomorrow, Radhika Raman is going to talk about mentors, from a Krishna conscious perspective. So, and then there's a panel, the call to adventure. Look at some devotee men and what was the challenges that they faced and how did they answer the call and when do they reject the call and, the tension that's outlined there. So I kind of find there's a lot of parallels to this in our devotee lives. And I'm wondering, I put a question in the chat, from your studies of this and your understanding, it seems like in the movies, you kind of go through this one-time circle. Maybe there's multiple challenges and, the one whale comes and you finally come, but then you come out at the end and, you get the girl, you get the house, you get the kingdom and, you get the fairy tale ending, which in one sense you could say you want to extrapolate. Okay, well, that's, go back to Godhead. But in terms of a practical, I'm just wondering, it seems it's not just, okay, I answered the call of the adventure when I moved into the ashram and took the cold showers, which we all did in our own way, either, last month or last year or 50 years ago. It seems there's a cycle, there's the event, there's the call, and then you kind of get to the comfort zone again. And then there's the next call and then the next call to kind of, in terms of our devotional lives. So if so, my real question is, what's your sense thinking about this? How do we prepare ourselves to be ready to take the next step and respond to the next call and not just kind of sit in our laurels and think, well, I responded when I was 20 and that's good. That's enough for this life. Or maybe we don't. Maybe it is enough. We responded when we were 20 and that's enough for this life. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, it really gets to the heart of everything. The only way I can respond to that, Anutama Prabhu, is by saying each of us has to really dig down and decide, am I in? Am I all in here? Do I actually believe this? Is this real? Or am I just buying into some pretty mythology? Maybe Krishna consciousness isn't absolute truth. Maybe it's a nice story, and I like kirtan, I like prasadam, and that's as much as you want to do. And in which case, fine, that's your prerogative. If Krishna consciousness for you is just a kind of a nice way to balance your life with temple services or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. I don't think you can get to the real nectar, as we sometimes call it, without paying your dues. I don't think you can reach those higher levels of self-awareness and to a point where, you're not just ritualistically going to temple for arti, but where you're communing with the deities, where the deities speak to you. This is the ultimate mystic experience, Krishna consciousness. But to qualify for that, you have to be prepared to sacrifice an awful lot. And just sometimes, I think sometimes the confusion comes is that we don't make the connection. We don't see it. I don't see how it is that if I agree to put up with the stuff I've got to put up with in my home life, that's going to help me spiritually. How is me being a better husband going to help me spiritually? We don't see the connection. So we get stuck. You get stuck. Well, either you divorce, and you just cut bait, and then you take your chances, or maybe you say, there's something more I can do here. Maybe there is something more than I can. Now, that may not be always the case. There may be situations where you cannot do more. If you're in a relationship with someone who has truly deep, profound psychological issues that are textbook, clinical depression or whatever, we have to recognize our limitations. There's only so much we can do with that. But then you really have to have exhausted all other possibilities before you make that kind of a change. Otherwise, for the most part, there's something more we can do.
Yeah.
There's something more we can do. And that never ends. That goes on all the time. You don't reach a point, well, now I've got it down. Now I've got my I've got my Krishna consciousness down. I know what I'm doing. I've got my thing. I don't want to rock the boat anymore. When you reach that point of complacency in your spiritual life, that's when you're in real trouble. That's when you're in real trouble. When you're not challenging yourself every day, now you're in trouble. Because that journey doesn't end. That Prabhupada wrote me a letter one time. He said, he was very kind. He said, you're very enthusiastic. He said, therefore, I am sure you will go back to Godhead in the very near future. He wrote this to me in a letter. He said, but now, continue on. Because Krishna consciousness is like a man swimming in the ocean, and you never find any end to it. So don't ever think you've reached some kind of plateau and now you're good. That's where you've got to dig in deeper. Be wary of those moments.
Oh, right. So I have few direct comments coming to me that would I should be reading the questions for them, or would they want to do it themselves? Well, the choice is absolutely yours, but if you read it yourselves, as Prabhuji was just telling it, you are into it, and you might be able to convey directly your emotions in a far better way. And we would also get an opportunity to see you that way. So I have a question right now, which is from Partha Prabhu, and his question is, often individuals may be in denial or fearful to address the negative influences of these roads of trial. Can you comment on this?
Well, first of all, if you're able to acknowledge that you're in denial, you've got a leg up in the game. Usually denial means that you were not aware of what you're confronting, or that you're avoiding something that needs attention. We're not our own best physicians. Let me put it that way. If you need some medical attention, you're probably better off not prescribing things for yourself. Go find a good doctor. So, if you have a friend in Krishna consciousness, that's very good. If you have a relationship with your spiritual master, where you're able to bring that kind of uncertainty to his or her attention, well, great. If you're not, find someone you can trust. Find someone you have some confidence in. I mean, it's a big movement out there. It's a big world, and you should be able to find someone you can talk to. And if you're really in a pinch, send me an email. I'll do what I can. But at least be aware of, the fact that prayer is a very great resource. Make sure that you've done everything you can first before you dump it in somebody else's lap. Right? Make sure you've done everything you can. And very often prayer is a good way to get to the heart of that. Just throw yourself at the lotus feet of the deities and say, boy, I need your help here. That prapatti, as it's described in the Gita, that giving over of oneself is very powerful. And it opens you up to receiving information that you might not have understood otherwise. How much time do we have? I don't want to run too far over my.
I think we can take a couple of questions, just the last few questions, I would say rather. So I think Partha Prabhu probably got the answer that he will have to resort to the prayers. And as Prabhuji mentioned that, find a friend. And I think this.
Can I ask a further question on that?
Well, I have a few more devotees asking questions there. So if they can quickly ask the questions, and if we have some time left, then I would come back to you.
Okay.
But as Partha Prabhu, you were also been advised to find a friend. And I think Mantra is a wonderful platform where you can find men across the world and the devotee friends. And of course, Bhakti Mark Swami Maharaj is there, Nuttama Prabhu is there, and so many other people. And definitely, I'm sure we're going to all the like-minded people together and have a good confidant here. So on that note, DK wants to ask a question. I don't know the full form. I'm sorry. This is how I should be, is that your name, DK Prabhu? Okay, I can just see probably a flower there.
Why don't you just ask the question?
Okay, so, okay, he's unmuted now.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you. And yes, I'm Dhira Krishna from Washington, D.C. My question is, I appreciate the presentation very much as a starting point of the mantra retreat, but is it, and why is it the template for the mantra retreat? I think it seems to me that the hero's journey could be for not only for man, but for anybody, couldn't it? That's my question. Thank you.
Well, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Well, you'll have to ask Bhakti Mark Swami. I don't know why he chose a mantra retreat, except that, look, the fact is there are things that we can talk about a little bit more comfortably in the company of other souls in men's bodies. That might be awkward talking about in mixed company. Or for that matter, you're just reminding me of going back to the last question. You don't have to find a self-realized soul to be able to open your heart to somebody. You'd be amazed. Just the person sitting next to you. Make the gesture yourself. Make that first step. And I think what you'll find is that you actually have a lot of friends out there. You have a lot of people you can talk to. They're all waiting for someone to make that first step, to say, I would like to be your friend in Krishna consciousness. Can we talk together? Can we do that? I think, sometimes we're afraid to open up in front of others. It's embarrassing. We don't want to admit the things that we do sometimes just to get through the day or, to keep going. But you really are not alone. I can promise you this, whatever it is that you're contending with, people will be grateful to you if you open up and begin to speak about it, because the odds are that they're also confronting something similar in their own way. And they're just waiting for someone to say, I'm here for you as your God brother. I'm happy to talk with you because I know what it feels like. I'm going through it myself. So that kind of an openness takes a little courage, but it goes a long way.
And to be asking this question on why to be putting that on the mantra, I am really happy that it was a part of mantra and it was a hero's journey. And we can request Prabhuji someday for having the heroine's journey as well later on. But right now, I'm so happy that the hero's journey and we got to be the part of this journey. On that note, I will have to thank Prabhuji once again, Yogesvara Prabhu, for taking out time and involving the heroes across the world world to be sharing this journey and, starting the presentation on such a rock solid note of bhakti, of devotional service, and answering those fundamental questions, but are so pensive for our Krishna consciousness. So thank you so much, Prabhuji, for your time here. We definitely enjoyed the entire presentation.